Hey. Hello, and good evening and welcome everyone. Today we are going to be talking about our intro to front-end development. This is just going to be going over some basic HTML and CSS. This is a very beginner friendly workshop. You saw in any of our ads, we mentioned that no coding experience is required. We are going to be doing a React workshop next week, so we figured it might be good to give some context to any maybe freshmen or sophomore students before who have never taught any web development. I always highly recommend people learn at least some basic front-end skills. Anytime you're creating a graphical UI, it's probably the easiest way to make one. It's the most accessible way to make one. Web is kind of the most universal platform there is. You can use it on any device. And it frankly has the most job openings. I'm sure those of y'all who have applied for internships have seen so many applications that say has experience in React, knows HTML, knows CSS. So we're going to try and lay down some of those foundational skills today. And this is also going to be a lot more interactive than a typical SSD workshop. I'm going to give y'all a lot of freedom to kind of pick some of the design choices. We're going to be building a page from scratch today. So we're going to really get in the weeds. Usually we don't have the time to go as slow whenever we do a demo like this, but because HTML is kind of a simple enough concept, we're hopefully going to be able to show y'all a lot of things live. So before we get started, does anyone have any questions? Awesome. Nice sketch. I would have dropped that. So, all right. So some quick announcements. Like I said, next week we are going to be doing a follow-up workshop to this, our front-end development with React.js. So if you like this week's workshop and you want to learn more about front-end, please come to that. And also tomorrow from 8:30 to 8:30, it's going to be the last day to vote for SG elections. Please go out and make your voice heard. This is pretty crucial for all clubs in the UF, not just us. And that's about it for now. So as for tools we'll be using today, and let me hide this real quick. So as for the tools that we're going to be using today, you already have everything you need as long as you have a working computer. If you have a text editor in a browser, you have all you need to do some basic HTML and CSS editing. However, I highly recommend that you use VS Code if you have it. It allows you to view your terminal in one place, view your folders in one place, and you can have syntax highlighting and useful extensions like live server. And I'm actually going to show you how to get live server right now. Basically, what that does is it automatically reloads your pages whenever you save it. So that way you don't have to switch tabs and refresh it every single time you make a change. So for those of you who never have installed an extension with VS Code before, I'll show you how to do that right now. So you're going to come here. You're going to come to your extensions on your left tab and just search for a live server. And just hit install here, give it a few seconds, and it's going to be as simple as that. That might take a second or so for my machine, so we'll go ahead and get back to the presentation for now. So first things first, is anyone here not familiar with the basic front-end stack at all? Kind of what goes into building a front-end web app? So basically, for any kind of front-end app, you're going to have three main components: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So HTML is a markup language. It's not technically a coding language. It basically describes where your elements are located on a page and what is located. We often like to say HTML gives us a structure for our web pages. So what buttons are where, what text is displayed where, what widgets we have, those kinds of things. That is what's written in HTML. CSS, we call our Yeezys because it's what makes us look nice. CSS is how we handle anything related to styling on the front end, so changing colors, spacing between elements, making our website responsive, so it will look different for different devices and make sure everyone can use it. That's handled by CSS. And then finally, JavaScript is our muscles. So making a site with just plain HTML and CSS will give you just a really pretty document. Now you can make it look really good, but if you just use HTML and CSS, you can't really build an app with it. You need to have some kind of code going on to process your data and call back in APIs, store it, that sort of thing. So we're not going to really be covering JavaScript today, just because getting into all three of these things in a 75-minute presentation is pretty difficult to do, and it's a lot of information to learn at once. But again, like I said, we are going to be doing a React workshop next week, and we have a 2-part workshop on JavaScript, TypeScript, and a whole bunch of that stuff back in the fall, which is available on our YouTube if y'all want to check it. All right, so again, like we said, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, those are the basic tools you need to get started with front end. What order should you learn it in? HTML is the #1 thing you got to learn first, right? That you don't have HTML, you don't have a web page. That is what decides what is where. The good thing about it is the level of HTML you need to know to really get started is pretty simple. If you ever see memes kind of saying people say, oh, HTML is really easy, it's kind of because it is. There's really not too much you need to know to really get started. And as for CSS, you just need to know some basic CSS too. Now, with CSS, the rabbit hole goes a lot deeper, so we are only going to be really getting into the basics of just that. So what we'll kind of go over today will be a good starting point. And that will pretty much be the majority of what we'll cover today. Also, some basic JavaScript features will be good. However, I don't recommend going straight in and making a front-end app with vanilla JS. We have much better frameworks for that nowadays. So you have React, Angular, Vue, etc. And once you learn how to do all that, you can get into the more advanced front-end stuff. So let's start right now and get right into it with our HTML. So this is kind of what some really basic HTML for a web page looks like. We'll go ahead and see that again when we move into our code editor in a second. Now, the first thing you need to know about how an HTML document works is tags. In HTML, everything is organized with tags. Now, if you're used to coding in like an actual programming languages, you're used to writing lines out and lines execute in order. Remember, HTML is a document first, so it's organized like a document. Now, in the tag system, everything is organized hierarchically. So basically, any element that you see inside of another element is called a nested element, and you can think of it as a child of that element. Now, whenever you actually load that HTML to a page, a child element will typically display in front of or on or inside of a parent. Now, there is this whole tree called the document object model, or the DOM, which if you want to learn more advanced stuff, it's basically kind of the underlying model that HTML runs on. And it's basically works in this tree hierarchy. So we'll go ahead and get into some examples of that in a second. But just know for now, tags are everything in HTML. Now, this is one example of what a very basic tag can look like. We have the name of our tag here, some attributes for it, and the content that goes inside the tag. Now, inside the tag, you can nest other tags, like I said, and put all kinds of content in there. Now, one very important thing about tags is that they have attributes that you can assign to it, and are kind of similar to arguments in a function in programming languages, right? So basically, in this example, I need an ID to identify this label. You would need this if you wanted to hook this up to some JavaScript and change what it says whenever a user clicks a button, for example. And we could add all sorts of attributes here, such as inline styles, so changing colors, spacing, etc. So, we'll go ahead and get started with a basic file right now before we kind of go any further. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to VS Code now. See, we've got our live server extension installed. So again, if you select this, you just go into extensions, look up live server, hit install. Let's come back here. So again, like I said, we're going to be doing this entirely from scratch. I've got a Git repo here, nothing else. First thing we're going to do is create a file called index.html. Anytime you're working on a web page, this is going to be the first HTML page that your browser looks for. And the great thing about VS Code is that you can kind of put the boilerplate in with a simple keyboard command. All you need to do is hit exclamation mark enter. And there we go. And this is our basic outline for an HTML page. So in the little body section here, I'm just going to put a simple hello world. And I'm going to go ahead and get started in the browser. Now you could, if you're not using live server, one thing you could do is go to wherever this is located in your file system. And yes, Firefox is my default browser. And you could get it loaded up that way. What I personally prefer to do is use live server. So if you have that installed, you can hit the go live button here. And there we go. So now again, if you have live server, every time I save here, it's going to refresh. So if I hit save, as you can see, it just changed the words from hello world to hello world from SSD. So go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and split these side by side just so we can see our changes in real time. And again, by default, it's going to be on localhost 5500. Awesome. So now that and just one more thing, if you use any kind of dark reader extension on your browser, make sure that's switched off, otherwise it's going to interfere with the styling. So now we've got a basic web page. What's going on here? So first things first, we have our head tag. So basically, the head tag's job is to show us various important metadata for our website. So the title that you see on a browser tag, on a browser tab, that's going to be in your head section. The little icon that you see on a browser tab when you click on a website, that's going to be in the head section. And any keywords for search engine optimization goes there. Importing CSS style sheets or JavaScript files or fonts or really almost anything you need to import would go into this head section. So let's go ahead and come back into the code right here. So right here, the title is document. If you look here at my browser tab name, you can see it's just called document. I'm going to go ahead and change this to live HTML demo. And when I save here, you can see the title of the tab in my browser here changed. So that's one really cool thing you can do with that. And then next here is the body section. Where we've written our hello world message here. So the body section is where all of your website's actual content lives, right? Anything in the head here doesn't display on a page, but stuff we put in the body section, that's what we're actually going to see. So you have 1,000,001 different tags that you can put here. Now it does read kind of in the same order that you would read on a page. So anything that we put on the top of the page is going to display before what comes on the bottom. It's kind of like reading a book. And that brings us into what's arguably the most important type of tag in HTML, the div. So a div is basically a way to group all your HTML code. Whenever you look at a web page and you're putting the components together, you need to group them into different sections. Now, we always talk about kind of code modularity here at SSD, grouping things based on what they do and where they belong. Same thing goes for your HTML. If I have a section of my code where I have a nav bar at the top, and then I have an article in the middle, maybe some kind of widget after that, I don't want to just put that all in the body section. I need to split them up into divs. And If you don't do that, it makes it really hard to do things like styling because divs are what allow us to give CSS classes to different parts of our code. It's what allows us to split up certain elements and use them with JavaScript. So again, you need to remember that a div is essentially a general purpose wrapper to kind of split our program, our web page up into different sections. So we can identify them by either classes or IDs. Classes are going to be for repeated divs, and IDs are for divs that we only use once. IDs are especially important for when you're using JavaScript. And speaking of JavaScript, we can include some JavaScript code by using the script tag and putting it in the head. Now, like I said, unless we have some extra time at the beginning, we're not really going to go over any JavaScript today. But this is pretty crucial. Now, you can put this anywhere in the head section. Typically, a lot of people recommend that you put the script tag as a last line in your head section. Just because you kind of want your CSS to come in and load before you have any like lag in your page. And then that brings us to our header tag. So this will probably be a good point for us to actually start putting some code down. So a header tag is basically a header. Same thing as it would be on a document in like Microsoft Word. Typically, when you display it by default in HTML, it's going to display it as bolded text. There's 6 variants of it. H1 is the largest and biggest, and H1 is the biggest, and H6 is the smallest. So we'll go ahead and start with our example right here. So let's go ahead and make an H1 tag. As you can see, the syntax for any general tag in HTML is going to be an opening tag like this and then a close tag. So I'm going to go ahead and call this our website. If I go ahead and save this now, you can see it's now big and bold. Now, in CSS, there are options where you can change the style or size of text manually, and sometimes you might consider doing that because, oh, I don't like the default size that H1 gives me. But if you have any important like sections in your website, you really do want to use a header tag. Does anyone here know by any reason why you want to make sure you're using header tags instead of, say, bolding manually? Yeah, were you raising it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in like a search engine, it's looking for like prominent elements on your website. So like if there's a header, it's gonna be like, oh, this is one, and it'll be more likely to show that. It's just like bold text. I don't think it would distinguish.
Yeah, that's exactly why. So search engine optimization is a big reason why. And search engines like Google, Bing, all of them, they parse through your web page and use that to find important keywords. Another big reason is accessibility, which we are going to do a whole section on later in this presentation. People who use screen readers, people who have other disabilities, they need a way to kind of go through your web page and know in what order to go in. So headers is how that screen reader knows what parts are important and what section of your web page is what. So we've got some very text formatting tags here. Again, this is kind of similar to like how you do it in word processing. You can make it bold, you can italicize your text, you can do line breaks. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with a simple starter paragraph here. So, for one, to make a paragraph in HTML, we can use a p tag. This is just going to be a paragraph of text, and we can put our text inside a tag like this. So our website load. I'm thinking I want to put something funny here. Does anyone have a copy pasta that they'd like to force me to use? No. And I really hope the mic didn't pick that up. Does anyone have an appropriate copy pasta? I'm gonna go ahead and use one that's kind of become a meme among SSD.
I was just thinking something terrible.
Oh, this is gonna let me copy it. There we go.
That's not like.
AMC, please do not sue us. All right, so now, if I could come back here and I save, one thing we're gonna see straight away is that HTML does not line break, unless you explicitly tell it to. So as you can see, if I start the page out here, it's gonna start the line all the way out. Let me bring that back to about half size. And even if I do a new line in a code like this and I save it, it's not going to change anything here. In HTML, you need to explicitly let the browser know when you want to do a line break. So to do that, you can use a BR tag here like this. If I save that, as you can see, it's going to break to a new line right here. We can also do formatting to bold and italicize our text. So the B tag, we can use it to bold our text. So I can do B here, put some emphasis like that. So we'll save it. As you can see, the word "you" is now bolded. And the EM tag allows us to do italics. So I'm actually going to break this to a new line here. I'm going to go ahead do EM. Closing tag. And the good thing about HTML needing you to kind of manually put in new lines means that if you have long strings of text that you're typing, you can just break them up like this and it won't affect how it looks on the actual page. And there we go. So now we have our famous Saul Goodwin quote. As a matter of fact, we'll go ahead and do this in honor of our former president, Eric, who was our former friend in Guru and helped us a lot building this presentation. Shout out to Eric, by the way. And there we go. That's just some basic HTML text formatting. Now, something that's very important for any web page are the links. So we create links with the A tag, and basically we make the A tag inside the brackets here. We put whatever text we want to go on top of the link, and we use the href attribute to specify what our destination link is going to be. So we'll go ahead and give an example of that real quick. So let me think, where would be a good place? So I'm just going to go ahead and make a link to the SSD website. So for this link, you can use an HTTP link and put any site on the internet. You can also use relative paths to go to a local web page. For example, when we go and create a second page in a second, you'll use an href tag like this to make the link there, and that's sort of how we'll access multiple web pages. So now that I put the href tag here, I come and click this. It is going to take us to the SSD. Nice. So, that is the basic href page. Again, like I said, in HTML you can nest classes. So we have text here right now, but you could put an entire div here. You can put an image, and whenever you click on it, it would take you to wherever this leads. Now, something else important, images. Now, displaying images in HTML is really easy. You just need to put the image tag and a link to wherever your picture is. Again, it could be a relative path in the product folder, or it could be a link from anywhere on the internet. Now, you might have read the last bullet point, but unless you're using CSS with, we will get to in a second. If you're using just pure HTML, and we try to get a picture here, let me see if I can get yeah, I need one. Okay, that's probably so I'm going to copy the image link. Maybe try to put this word paragraph. So it's gonna be image src equals link. And this is very long slash image. Now, looking at this picture of proportions, this is a 1200 pixel image. Now, when I save this and reload the page, can anyone tell me what's gonna happen?
Be very big.
Exactly. So one important thing to know about HTML is that when you load an image in HTML, unless you do some resizing with CSS, it is going to load that picture as whatever the default resolution it was. So that's something you got to keep in mind. So for now, we'll go ahead and go for a smaller picture. This is 264 pixels. Hopefully this is small enough. We'll go ahead and replace it here. And then if we go ahead and refresh, that is much better. So one other important attribute for images is the alt text attribute. Now this serves two purposes. One, if the image can't load for whatever reason, it will display that there so people know what's going on. Again, when you're loading images from other places on the internet, you might not know what happened if that server goes down. And two, and more importantly, it's important for accessibility. And if someone needs a screen reader, they can't see, well, then they can't look at your image. So that screen reader is going to tell you what's there instead. So leave that for you. Oh, and I'm just going to say world's best layer. Now, in most cases, you need to be a little bit more descriptive, but everyone knows that Saul Goodman is the world's best lawyer. So we'll go ahead and leave that there. And that's kind of how you load a basic image. Now, lists. You can, again, similar to how in a document, you can do numbered lists or unordered lists. You can do the same thing in HTML. OL and a UL tags create unordered lists and unordered lists respectively. And inside the list, you have to mark each kind of bullet point with something called a list item. So we can go ahead and add that here real quick. We're actually gonna use this opportunity to create our first little nav bar. So let's go ahead and create that. Now, this tag right here called nav is something called a semantic tag, which we'll explain a little bit more about later. It's like another div, except it's used for more common specific elements of web pages that you see all across websites on the web, such as nav bars, you see it on every site. Again, this is good for things like screen readers. So let's go ahead and put our unordered list in here. And as you can see, let's say we're going to put some links in here. You would do UL to indicate you want an unordered list, and then LI for each individual listing. So home page, second page, and then I reload that. So you can see I've got two little bullet points right here. Now, for an actual nav bar to work, we would expect to have some links. So we'll go ahead and demonstrate how to make that second page right now, and make the links to it. So what I'm going to do is come back to my file explorer here. We'll just create a second page. I'll just call it page2.html. And again, we're going to use exclamation mark enter to put all of our automatic HTML content. I'm just going to say, welcome to this second page. Awesome. Now to actually get there from our document, we're going to need a link. So again, in this tag, we can nest a link. So again, we use the A tag for links. Again, we still want to say second page. And a link to that other page is just going to be page2.html because this time it's a relative path. It's in the same folder as our main HTML. So now if we click this, we go to the second page. And I'm just going to go back here. And that's how you create a link to another page. Also, just for consistency, I'm going to add an href for the home page, even though we're there already. If you put a hashtag in the href attribute, it's just going to link to nowhere. So now it will be highlighted, but it's not going to move because we're on the original page. And those are kind of the basic HTML elements that we want to go over for now. So again, we've gone over divs, lists, headers, images. We may do buttons if we have some time at the end of the presentation. That's again kind of dependent on JavaScript. And since we're not going to be doing JavaScript in the first part of this, there's really not any point in doing it right now. And also, you could technically use any kind of div as a button, although again, for the accessibility reasons, it's not necessarily recommended. But again, a tag for that would be the same way. It would just be a button and then whatever content you want on the tag can be there. So right now, this is kind of the web page we're working with. It's very, very basic, right? This is kind of what web pages looked like in 1996. And I don't think anyone here would probably want to put a product like this on a portfolio unless it was a joke. So, how do we make it look good? How do we add colors, spacing, make it look like an actual modern web page? That's what we use CSS for. And that brings us to the next part of our workshop. So CSS stands for cascading style sheets. They're basically a rule set for determining how our web pages look. You can either determine these rules in an external CSS file. You can also do something called inline CSS, where we add a CSS rule directly in our HTML. It is good practice to kind of limit how much inline you do because it runs a little slower and makes your HTML harder to read. But it can come in handy when you need to make small changes to an HTML element. So the basic way CSS works is you select a tag. Now, again, we mentioned earlier that in HTML, everything is organized using tags and that you couldn't really use CSS without it. This is why we use tags in CSS to identify what part of the web page we want to apply a style to. The syntax is a little bit different depending on what you're trying to select. If we use a class for our div, we'll do dot class name. If we use an ID, remember we use IDs for a div that we only use once, we're going to do hashtag ID name. And then if we're applying a style to any of the default HTML tags, we'll just do the name of that tag. Once you have that name, which is called a selector by the way, you're going to open up some brackets and then list all the rules that you want right here. So in this example, we have a rule that would turn our page's background red, the color beige, and then set font size. So let's go ahead and get some actual examples of what that looks like. So let's come back to our page here and create a new CSS file. So I'm going to go here, hit the plus. It's called as styles.css. And we've got a brand new CSS file. Now, the first thing we need to do is actually import this into our HTML page. So you're going to do that here in the head tag. So right here, what we're going to do is to link style sheet. I'm actually going to check just the syntax we're seeing. And also just a fair warning to you, no one ever remembers the entirety of the syntax for this. So I'm just going to go ahead and get this fragment folder. And there we go. So it's going to be link rel style sheet, and then href is going to be styles.css. So that's how we import our CSS file. Now, we actually have to apply the styles that we want, right? So let's come in here. Let's go ahead and apply something to the whole body of our HTML. So again, like we said, body is kind of the second outermost tag. There is an HTML tag. It's far out on a hierarchy, but you typically don't do any editing there. So I want to change this entire page's background color to maybe something darker and then make the text lighter. So you come here, there's two very important tags for that. The color style will set the text color for the current element, and the background will set the background color for the current element. So if we come back here again, let me see. I'm thinking, let's switch to darker. So I'm going to set the color to be white. And then for our background, does anyone have any color suggestions or something dark we could use? Navy, good choice. So we'll go ahead, do that, save it, and now we have pages navy. Now, as you can see, the links are a little bit hard to see. We'll fix that in a second. Some cool things that you can do with this include things like gradients. The background is really cool because you can stack multiple backgrounds on top of each other. So let's say if you wanted to add some kind of background image to your page and then add a color on top of it or a gradient on top of that, those are all options you can do. And as a matter of fact, there are a lot of different ways to select colors in CSS. Now, you can use a preset color options as we just did right here. You can just type in certain colors and there are lots of presets like white and navy. However, sometimes you want a custom color option. And there's two ways to get that. You can either use the RGB selector, which will allow you to type in the 3 RGB values of it, or you can use the hexadecimal code, which is exactly the same thing, but written in a more nerdy way. And I highly recommend using VS Code's color picker here. So if we go ahead and demonstrate that. Let's say I want to make our background a bit darker. So if I come and hover over the color, I get this nice looking color picking tool. And I can come and drag that down a bit. And as you can see now, it's going to replace this with the RGB command. When I save that, now our page is a little bit darker and a little bit easier to read. Let's see. And one other cool thing are alpha channels. In addition to the red, green, blue channels, you can use something called alpha, which basically determines how opaque the background is. So again, if you want to like overlay a color over a background image, you can set your colors alpha to maybe be 90%. And maybe get something kind of looking like my VS Code editor here with the background picture. And fun fact, VS Code is actually made with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, despite it being a desktop program. So that's exactly what they've done right here. And fonts. So one thing that will help our web page not look like it came out of 1996 is using something other than Times New Roman. So we use a font family tag to do that. So I'm gonna go here, font family. I've got a whole lot of options here. As you can see, whenever I click it, I don't click just one font here. So I'll go ahead and save it. This looks a little bit more modern now. But as you can see here in a font, I mean, there's multiple fonts listed. Does anyone here know why we put multiple fonts whenever we list a font? Right?
The user might not have every font installed on their system, so it's just going to keep checking for
That's close. So typically with fonts, you can actually import fonts from online, and we're actually going to show you how to do that in the next slide. The real reason is in case a font can't load. Again, anytime you're loading another resource onto your page from over the internet, there's always going to be just a small amount of risk there in case the connection is down or something. So having a backup font will allow you to hopefully make your page still look nice in the case that it can't reach Google servers to get whatever cool custom font you wanted. So we'll go ahead and get into that right now. So a great resource for finding free fonts is Google Fonts. Basically, you just pick a font you want, select it, and then copy this section into your HTML head section. We'll go ahead and do that right now. So let's go to fonts.google.com, and I spelled that wrong. That is not what I meant to do. There we go. Awesome, so we got a whole bunch of options here. I'm just gonna kind of keep scrolling until someone picks out a font that y'all like. Is there anything that anyone wants to use? And you can just feel free to shout it out. Yeah, the what?
Robotos.
Okay, actually, Comic Sans should work by default. You don't have to import it. So actually, I'm gonna go ahead and replace it with this.
Impact on.
Why am I doing this? I forgot where I had. Did I not spell that right? I think it should be. I think it's Comic Sans. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, now rule number one of this graphic design and UX design in general: never use Comic Sans. But
We're disruptive.
we're gonna disrupt the industry. So let's see, just for the example here, we'll go ahead and pick Roboto, just like I show how to import a font real quick. So again, you want to click on the font, pick whichever weight you want. I'm just gonna select regular. And then this part right here is what you're gonna copy and then paste it to the head of your HTML section. So I'm gonna copy this. And snap this back to the left side here. And then come back to my HTML's head section. Paste these here. And now I can go into back in my CSS and put that font there. So bye for now, Comic Sans. We're gonna put Roboto, and then when we save and reload, it now loads up. So whatever cool, crazy fonts you want to use, that's the easiest way you can add them into your program. No need to download anything. Now, if we kind of come back in our presentation here, the next element we want to get into is margins and padding. This basically allows us to control how much space we have on the edge of elements. Now, it can be pretty confusing figuring out what the difference of these two commands are, because they are pretty similar. Basically, margin adds space to the inside edge of an HTML element, and padding adds space to the outside edge. So I'm actually gonna do something here to demonstrate the difference. So for our paragraph right here, I'm gonna add a background color to it. This is kind of a good tactic as well in case you want to know how much space one of your HTML elements is taking sometimes. So let's see. I'm gonna go ahead and make a div here so I can do more CSS stuff later. As a matter of fact, we'll go ahead and use that for now. So I'll go ahead and move this in here. Let's go ahead and set a class name for this. So for class, we're just gonna say main paragraph. And then now to come and edit this in our CSS file, we're gonna come here. We're gonna do dot main paragraph. Again, for a class, you use dot to access it. And then now I'm gonna go ahead and pick a background color for this. Does anyone have any color suggestions? What do you say? Mauve. Let me see, do they have that? Okay. Well, since that wouldn't load, what I'm gonna do is just go to our color picker here and pick that manually. This is what mauve looks like, right? All I know is I saw, reason I know what mauve is, I saw a clip about like Jay-Z talking about his suit once. Someone called it pink and he was getting mad like, it's not pink, it's mauve, bro. So if any of you say that this is pink, I will have to ask you to leave, but. Okay, I don't know how visible that's gonna be, but. Since we were putting the wider color as our background, we're gonna set our actual text color to black. And when I save. Nice, we have a nice mauve background now. So now the real reason I put this background here, so I can show you the difference between margin and padding. Like I said, margin will add more space to the outside edge of this, and padding, well, I'm sorry, margin will add more space to the. I'll only demonstrate because even I get it twisted up sometimes. So as you can see, next to our photo of Saul right here, our paragraph is pretty close, right? We want to space it out somewhere. So if I go ahead and add margin 10, for example, when I refresh, you can see there's more blue space in between the image and our paragraph section. Now, let's say I were to get rid of the margin and say padding 10 instead. Let me see. The unit, thank you. The actual background itself will get bigger. So remember, padding makes the element itself basically grow in size, and margin kind of adds more space to the edge of the element. So I'm actually going to use that right here. And by the way, you can specify how much padding you have on different sides. If you just add one number, it's going to add 10 pixels of padding on each side. But if I wanted to maybe only add 10 pixels of padding to the top, I could do something like 10 px, 0 px, 0, 0. And now it only does that on the top. So I'm going to make it uniform because that is ugly. Actually, let's make it 5. And then maybe add a 5 pixel mark. Cool. So we've got a little bit more space now between this. Also, one cool thing, if you ever want to make like rounded corners to make your UI look a bit more modern, you can use something called border radius. Let's maybe say something like 10 pixels here, and you can see it's a bit more curved. There we go. So now it's starting to come together a little bit. So that's the difference between margin and padding. Now, the next important thing, and this is the part where it's really easy to get mixed up, is how to really arrange items across the page. Now, long story short, there are a million ways to do this in CSS. Inline, block, grids, flex blocks, those are all different combinations you can use for your display element. We're going to go over Flexbox for now because it's kind of most versatile. And basically, it's a flexible display option that you can use to either arrange your elements in rows or in columns. So we'll go ahead and demonstrate right here. So right now, we have everything in columns already. But let's say I want to come take our links here and put them in a row. So let's see. What I'm going to do is find an HTML tag where this is. So this is in the unordered list. So I'm going to do nav ul. And also, if you have, I also mentioned you can do HTML. You can use a CSS on default HTML tags. If you want to use a CSS style on only a certain tag within another tag, you can do it like this. So by doing this nav ul, I'm only applying a style to unordered lists that are inside our navbar tag right here. So what I can do is I can say display flex and do flex direction row. And if I save that, our little navbar here now shows up in a row. Now, there is something that I have to change right here. A couple things actually. So first, for a list item, if you want to get rid of the little bullet point that's there, we'll make a separate CSS style for that. Now I've changed it to nav li. And I'm going to do a display inline. And that gets rid of our bullet points here. And then we also kind of want to maybe space this out a little bit, right? So what I'm gonna do is come to our whole body tag right here. Let's go ahead and specify that we want to use flexbox here and make it a column, right? So let's region column. Now, so we can see this kind of blows up the image a little bit, but we can fix this. So the next thing we want to do is make sure there's much more file. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and after the status image main paragraph class. There we go. It's a little bit smaller now. I'm also gonna add. I don't like the corners there, but I'll leave it for now. Now, let's say we want to center all this info. What we can do here is use align items to the center. And it can be a little bit inconsistent sometimes. One thing about CSS that we learned very quickly is we're not going to be able to get through every style in one presentation. A lot of it just is trial and error. So please forgive me if I make some mistakes here. Now, as we can see, this style does not apply to everything on down. So for our main paragraph tag here, we'll actually have to go and style that ourselves. So I can try align items, and I believe I will need to add some sort of display element in order to use that. So let's see flex column. And there we go. Now our image is in the center of the page. Let's see. And as for our nav bar up here, another cool thing you can use to kind of debug your HTML bit is inspect element. So I'm sure most of y'all open that before. You can right click on your browser, hit inspect. And when you do this and you hover over a certain HTML element, it will let you know how big that is. Again, this is another useful way to know kind of how much space an element's taking up. Like, for example, I can see here that our nav bar isn't stretching out all the way to over the page. Let's say I want to do that. Well, we know it's not doing that because we can look at our inspect element here. And we can go ahead and write some CSS to correct that. So for the nav, I'm going to go ahead and make another style. Let's go ahead and say with 100%. And that's going to cause it to be, cause this width to basically be the entirety of its parent element. So since its parent element is the body page, it's going to stretch out entirely. And then now to space these out of it, because we know this is not good. We're going to go ahead and use something called justify content, and we'll just go ahead and do space between. It's going to add some space to our links here. Let's do space there. And there we go. It looks a little better now. And last thing, I'm going to go ahead and change just the color of the links real quick. Again, if you want to add a style to the HTML element, so it's the element name with brackets, say color white. If you want to take away the underline, you can say text decoration none, and then that'll be gone. And then another cool thing is that if you want to make the color change whenever you hover over it, you can do a:hover. And then let's say I want the color to be, someone want to pick a color for when we hover over it. Make it also pink. Cool. Actually, there we go. It was waiting for us. So now when we go back, say when I hover over that, it's going to be mauve, not pink. I'm gonna have to ask you to leave. It kind of sucks because you're supposed to. He's about to speak in 2 slides. That's unfortunate. But yeah, that's how you can kind of get it. So hover over a link whenever you load it. So Now, one thing that any of the more experienced front-end people in here might have called me out for is for using PX as my units. So PX is for pixels. I'm sure we're all familiar with what that is. A big problem with using those is it doesn't change size based on the type of device we have. And in today's internet, responsive design is very important. You'll have people using your website on your phone, on computers, on tablets, different screen sizes. So for most apps, it's going to be important that you're gonna make your page be able to adapt to different screen sizes. So instead of PX, here are some units that you might want to use. So EM is an element, is basically relative to an element's default font size. So I'll use an example right here. Let's say I want to make our header here a little bigger. This will also be a good example of inline CSS. So I'll go ahead and do style equals. This is how we can write CSS online. And let's say I want to make that header a bit bigger. If I do font size, see 2EM, it's now going to make the font twice as big. Let's try 4EM instead. There we go. That's much bigger. And then here we have rem. It's like EM, but specifically for the root element of the whole web page. View width and view height are very useful. This is when you want to make something relative to the entire window, basically. So if you set something to be 100 V8, that size basically is going to be the same as the entire window. And then another extremely useful one that we use already is the percent. It's going to be relative to the parent elements with drive. Now, we've already gone through a lot of the most important tags here that are useful to know. But as you kind of saw, this is only the beginning. CSS is one of those things where it's kind of simple to get started, but it takes years to really call yourself a master at it. I'm not a CSS master. I don't think anyone in this room is probably qualified enough to call themselves a CSS master. So the only way to learn is by doing. And do not do a whole bunch of random tutorials that are all cookie cutter. Learning to really kind of make your own elements that are a little more complicated are what will teach you to kind of learn those nuances a bit more. It's gonna suck, you're gonna mess up a lot, and you're gonna be like, what the hell, this broke, I have no idea what I'm doing. But it's necessary pain to kind of learn what you need to do to really get good at this. And there's also various libraries and frameworks you can use to get started. Now, in our examples that we use here, we just did completely vanilla code, didn't import anything, but there's CSS libraries like Bootstrap that kind of help you get running with a lot of this stuff. There's also plenty of JavaScript libraries. jQuery is an old one that's not really used too much anymore. But if you want to torture yourself, go ahead. I've known some like older software developers who work with jQuery and they hated it. But if you're ever going to work with something like a legacy code base before they use frameworks like React and stuff, it could be good to know. And also, if you want to learn more about frontend in general, but I personally would recommend that you learn a more modern framework like React. And you can kind of see here. I think this was courtesy of Eric. As soon as frameworks like React kind of took hold, jQuery just tanked in popularity. And if you see anyone starting a new project with jQuery in 2023, especially for a big project, run, because that person is probably unwell. But yeah, next up is going to be our section on accessibility and why it matters. I'll go ahead and forward my phone.
All right, thank you, Jonas. So, all right, so let's say you've got this awesome web page made with your HTML, CSS, maybe you got a little bit of JavaScript in there, and now you want to share it with other people. So I'm going to be talking about accessibility first and then deployment. So accessibility is really important when it comes to publishing your content to the internet. Accessibility makes the web a fair place for all people, regardless of whatever disabilities someone may have. They should still be able to access whatever you're putting out there. It helps also, maybe if you don't have a permanent disability, think about someone who might have a temporary disability. For example, if you were to break your hand, or if you have a concussion, you have light sensitivity issues, you don't want the fonts to be really similar to the background and then have to jack up your brightness and like, you know, hurt your eyes. Also, if you're a really bad person, you don't care about any of that stuff. A lot of places are legally required to do it anyways. For example, if you're working for a government agency or pretty much any public business, you're going to need to worry about accessibility regardless. So a couple accessibility examples. The first one is, like we said, the font color with the background. This is pretty hard to read. So if you prefer, just put a box behind it and increase the contrast, you can make something much more readable. You also saw that plenty with the website demo when we had to change the color of the link so that we could actually see what we were clicking on. As far as alt text goes, we briefly covered this for images. If we look at line 10 here, can you see my mouse? Yes, you can. Line 10 here is just a regular image tag. And we have our alt text of ocean with the sunset. And then here below, we have an anchor tag, which is which we went over as a link. And inside of that anchor tag, we have an image tag. So this is how it looks basically when you click on an image to take you somewhere. And for that, we want the alt text to be where it's going to take you so that someone who's using a screen reader is able to see where they're going, because where they're going is a lot more important than what the picture is of. A couple more examples to consider. Color alone to give information. For example, like if you're doing a form, the reason you see like red and an asterisk is for people who are colorblind, so that if they can't necessarily make out that the color is different, they can still see an asterisk for required fields. Not using closed caption on videos. If you're going to embed a video, you should have some sort of closed captioning support. Unlabeled form fields. So basically what this is, if someone's blind and using a screen reader, it'll read out what the form field is supposed to be. So that's like that gray text that's inside of the form. Using mouse only navigation. If someone's only able to navigate with like the tab button or like using vocal cues to go to the next tab, your website wouldn't be accessible if you have to click somewhere specific and you don't have support for that. No low data friendly versions. So for example, those really awesome like web pages you see from like the new iPhone, how it shows like those really cool displays of animations, that's actually just a bunch of pictures. So you do need to download a lot of pictures for that. So somebody who's, for example, using like satellite internet might not necessarily be able to download all those pictures. So this isn't just accessibility from a disability standpoint, but accessibility for someone who doesn't have that level of data access to download a whole bunch of pictures. And then also no mobile friendly version. If someone only has a phone, they don't have a computer to really access it with. If it looks really bad and it's hard to use, that's not great. So when you're making your app, just try to consider as many things as possible. Someone who might have auditory, cognitive, neurological, physical, speech-based, or visual disabilities. Try to make as many considerations for those as possible. All right, and so also semantic HTML can be helpful for screen readers as well. We also went over this with the nav. A couple others are like header sections, footer sections. Yeah. And this is just, it was introduced in HTML5, by the way. Okay, so as far as hosting your front end goes, when you actually go on your browser and you type in www.google.com, your browser is making an HTTP request to a web server, and it gives you the file. Now, this is a very big oversimplification. You can learn more about it in all the networking courses we offer here, but we'll just say that your browser says, hey, I want this page. The server gives it back to you. The browser is then going to parse the HTML file that it just got and look for any other links, like an image, a JavaScript file, CSS, or anything else. And then your browser renders all this together to make a front end. It might also, if it has JavaScript going on to also help with some of the rendering, it'll do that as well. So when it comes to having your own server to host your stuff on, the easiest is by far GitHub Pages. So it's currently free. That's not guaranteed forever, of course, but they said they're going to support it for quite a while. Basically, all you have to do is make this repo on your account, username.github.io, and then push the code to it. I can show you a quick example of mine. All right, so yeah, we've just got, simple website to navigate it. I learned JavaScript for this part, so like, it's cool it's a really great way to learn it if you're going to host it. GitHub page is what I recommend, but there are a couple more options. Oh. Okay, you can also host on UF Storm. I've never heard of anyone actually doing this, but it would be kind of cool. Basically all I have to do is SSH in either Storm or Thunder. You're gonna need to make a CISE account if you haven't already. You probably should do that regardless because it lets you SSH into Linux systems, which is great for a lot of courses that will test your project on Linux. You can create a public repo on your GitHub account from there, or deal with credentials. I wouldn't really recommend that, just make it public because it's a publicly accessible web page anyways. Your SSH account will have a public _HTML folder regardless, or already, sorry. And then all you have to do is pull the code and then access it there. So for example, like everyone has one of these. I can pull mine up really quick. Let's see. Pretty sure it's just this. Oh. So everyone's looks like this by default. Let's see if it'll actually work. Yeah, everyone just has a hello world page. So if you ever wanted to do it on that, you can do it there. However, it's only going to last as long as your UFID. So it's not great for the long term. And then option 3, which is hard mode, is with AWS. So you can put all your files in an S3 bucket and enable static hosting. So there's going to be a lot of built-in support for this, for example, logs, caching, and configurability. So you're going to have access to basically AWS's entire content delivery network, which is going to make certain things load a lot quicker. But you know, if you're just hosting like your portfolio, just use GitHub Pages. Save yourself the headache. All right, and then a couple of best practices for HTML. You want to optimize your code for clarity, accessibility, and search engine optimization. I would say probably in that, no, not in that order, accessibility first. But you're not going to be the only person working on HTML code, HTML, not code, but you know, marked up documents in a professional environment. So you want to make sure other people are able to understand what you've actually done. Use the right tags to describe things. One big one is buttons versus anchor tags for navigation. If you're going to a different website, you absolutely should use an anchor tag and not like a button that makes a function that brings you to the page. Like that's really inaccessible and not the best thing to do. Label images, links, and buttons. So that's for the alt text. Enable tab navigation, like we said, and keep mobile users in mind. So you should always try to load it up on your phone to make sure it looks okay. And for example, with the live server, you can, if you're on the same Wi-Fi network, you can type in that same IP and check it on your phone. And so after you've learned your HTML and CSS, what should you do now? Some basic JavaScript concepts such as arrow functions, async await promises. And also I'd recommend learning how to manipulate the DOM of JavaScript. So for example, my resume example where you click on the course and it shows you stuff about the course, that's some pretty basic DOM manipulation. And then maybe learn NPM and TypeScript as well. So we actually did a workshop on both of those. It was another doubleheader in the fall. So if you want to look at that, that'd be a good resource. And then framework of your choice will speed up the development process by quite a bit. We've got a React workshop coming up next week, which will be hosted by Brian. And then Angular and Vue are also pretty popular options. And then some other front-end libraries such as Redux, styling libraries, and others. And I'm pretty sure that takes us to the end. Yeah. All right. So any questions?
One last thing, because it is 7:25. Would anyone like to see a quick demo of how to deploy this to GitHub pages, or are we good for today? Okay, I'd show of hands who wants to see me deploy this to GitHub pages. Okay, who's against? I'll cheer. Okay.
Are we?
So yeah, last thing I'm gonna do is deploy to GitHub pages. This is by far the easiest way to put your website on the web. That was a redundant sentence. So first things first, you need to have a basic understanding of how to use Git and GitHub. We're not gonna go over that now since we've done workshops on that before. I've already set up a Git repo up for this. So let's see status here. Another great benefit of VS Code, if you never use it, you can open up a terminal right where you decided. So I'm gonna go ahead, git add everything we just did. Git commit, say, first commit. And then go ahead and, oh, let me hide this. And then go ahead and push that up to our repo. So. See, there we go, awesome. So now if we come back here. And I refresh this real quick. We now have this example up on the UFSSD GitHub. And this is public for all of you to reference later if you want to come back and get any of the code. Now on to deploy this, we're gonna go ahead and go to settings. Pages. And then build deployment source, we're gonna just do build for deploy from a branch. And let's see, select the branch that we want to deploy this off of. Go ahead and hit main and save. And let's see, you can use a custom domain if you want to host this. Actually, if you go to the SSD website, that is actually hosted off the GitHub pages too, but you can access it from ufssd.org. So again, for a personal website, especially, I highly recommend GitHub pages. And go ahead and check and see if this is up. Let me make sure I'm not missing this step. Okay, custom domain. I think this should be. It's been a little while since I did this, but that's my check out was all I needed. I think it might be since it's on our city. Right, I'm just gonna say let's see this here. This also could take a second. This is still free, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it says it's currently being built. All right, so it might take some time. Last time I did this, it didn't take too long. And that's all you need to do. So let me refresh one more time to see if it's available yet. There we go. Okay, it just took some time. So now if we go here and hit the active deployment and view. All right, so that did not work because we already have a domain here for the SSD website. But if you don't have anything else going on your GitHub pages, those subsites follow all you need to do and it'll deploy just like this. Apologies for that. We will get that fixed up later. But again, the code for the rest of the demonstration is available on GitHub with free on publicly reviewed. Does anyone have any questions before we finish up? Yeah.
How do I center a div?
I'm sorry, but no one knows the answer to that, and no one ever will. Any answerable questions that we might I might hope to know someday. All right, thank you guys for coming out so much. We'll be following up with a React workshop next week. Everyone get home safe and have a good one.
There's merch on the table. You guys should take some.